立法會
The President. Good morning. We will continue with the second reading debate on the Basic Housing Units Bill. I now call upon the Secretary for Housing to reply. President, I move that the second reading of the Basic Housing Units Bill be resumed. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Chen Hak-kun, Chairman of the Bills Committee, Ms. Jovi Chan, the Deputy Chairman, and other members of Bills Committee, as well as staff members of the Electoral Secretariat for their efforts, which have made it possible for the scrutiny of the bill to be completed smoothly and efficiently, and for the resumption of the second reading debate on the bill. I would also like to thank members who have spoken in support of the second reading of the bill and for their valuable views. As I mentioned when moving the second reading of the bill, the inadequate supply of land and public housing in Hong Kong for a sustained period of time in the past due to various factors has forced some of the underprivileged to live in subdivided units in very poor condition. This is heart-wrenching and should not happen in a metropolis like Hong Kong. Solving the housing problem has always been the top priority of the current term government. The current term government has introduced a number of innovative and groundbreaking housing policies since it took office. Over the past 3 years, we have managed to change the predicament of insufficient housing supply and completely reverse the previous situation of having limited supply early on, with the ratio of housing supply in the 2 following years and the 2 years after that becoming 60-40 compared to 70-30 before, or 30-70 before. The Housing Bureau has continued its efforts to enhance speed, quality, efficiency, and quality, substantially increasing the number of public housing units, providing 30,000 light public housing flats and transitional housing units. All these measures have allowed people on the waiting list to be allocated public rental housing as soon as possible, thus forming the foundations for solving the problem of substandard subdivided unit. In line with the Chief Executive's proposal in last year's policy address to set up a new regulatory regime for subdivided units by way of legislation, the Housing Bureau introduced the bill into the Electoral for scrutiny in early July this year. The purpose of the bill is to provide a legal basis for the implementation of the regulatory regime for basic housing units and provide clear minimum living environment standards for subdivided units for rent. Under the regime, subdivided units in residential buildings will be required to comply with the relevant minimum standards and obtain the BHU recognition before they can be lawfully let out for residential purposes, so as to ensure that subdivided units are safe and hygienic and reasonable in living environment, with a view to phasing out substandard subdivided units. In connection with the legislative proposals, the Housing Bureau conducted a stakeholder consultation exercise for about 2 months. In December last year, we have also consulted various stakeholders, including the Electoral Panel on Housing. Members and stakeholders generally agreed with the framework. The bill duly reflects the major views received during the consultation exercise. During the Bills Committee meetings, members scrutinized the provisions of the bill in detail. We're grateful to the Bills Committee and the legal advisor for putting forward a lot of valuable views. The government has also given detailed explanations on the issues raised by members at the meetings of the Bills Committee. After careful consideration, we have adopted some of the suggestions and proposed relevant amendments. I will provide more details when I propose the amendments during the committee stage later. As for what members said earlier about implementation arrangements, such as coordination among government departments, setting up a database, continuously enhancing implementation details, support measures, and inspection and reporting mechanism. We will pay close attention when implementing the BHU regulatory regime in future to facilitate the smooth implementation of the regime. In the following, I will give a consolidated response to members' views and observations and briefly address the issues of greater concern to society in relation to the bill. For grace period registration and recognition system for BHUs, we understand that owners, operators, and tenants of subdivided units need time to adapt. Therefore, we will provide a transitional period of 48 months in total. That is a 12-month registration period, the registration being free of charge. Existing subdivided units will be given a grace period of 36 months after registration, so as to give owners and operators reasonable time to carry out alteration works and apply for BHU recognition for their subdivided units, and allow tenants of standard subdivided units to look for alternative accommodation. Also, to encourage owners and operators to obtain recognition for their subdivided units as early as possible, we will designate the 6 months before the expiry of the grace period as a countdown period, during which subdivided units that are registered but have yet to obtain recognition will not be allowed to enter into new domestic tenancies, so as to prevent owners and operators from delaying alteration works or application for recognition to the last minute. To encourage owners and operators to apply for recognition as early as possible, the government will also offer an early bird fee waiver. That is, the fee will be fully waived if one registers and applies early. The government will also be more flexible with the late submission of the notices of tenancy, that is Form AR2, which is required for tenancy control of subdivided units during the registration period. On minimum living environment standards. Regarding the minimum living environment standards for basic housing units, we commissioned a consultant to conduct a survey last year and early this year to gauge the living environment of existing subdivided units in Hong Kong, using a statistical methodology endorsed by the CNSD to assist us in formulating the minimum standards. So the standards are very much scientific and evidence-based. Taking into account the findings of the consultancy study and the views of stakeholders, as well as striking a balance between social acceptance and the need to ensure that subdivided units can provide a safe, hygienic, and reasonable living environment, the government has set out the minimum standards in 8 areas, including internal floor area, headroom, etc. Some members asked about light well. Actually, light well is allowed. There might have been some misunderstanding. We will provide more details in the Code of Practice. Based on the findings of the consultancy study, we estimate that about 70% of the subdivided units can comply with the minimum standards through relatively simple alteration works, such as retrofitting of fire extinguishers and individual fire detectors. The remaining units may require more extensive alteration works to meet the minimum standards. We expect that substandard subdivided units with living conditions worse than the minimum standards will gradually be phased out. Members said yesterday that the utilities use may go beyond the capacity of the buildings. We do not have to worry about that because we expect that more subdivided units will be phased out. Once we have set out clear standards for subdivided units, new operators will enter the market to provide recognized compliant basic housing units to help meet market demand. On rent for subdivided units, we also note some in society are concerned that the introduction of minimum standards for subdivided units may cause landlords and operators to pass on the compliance costs to tenants through rent increases. We reiterate that the existing tenancy control for subdivided units already regulates the rents of subdivided units. The rate of rent increase upon renewal of a tenancy for the first 2 years of tenancy and the second 2-year period cannot be higher than the percentage change for private residential properties, and is subject to a cap of 10%. With an increase in public housing supply and other housing projects, we expect that the demand for subdivided units by SDU tenants will continue to decline. In addition, with a total transitional period of 48 months under the regulatory regime, substandard subdivided units will be rectified progressively within this 48 months. Rent level has always been related to supply and demand in the market. If more households on the waiting list have more choices of more suitable accommodation, the demand for subdivided units in market will naturally diminish. So we envisage that there will hardly be room for a significant upward adjustment in the rent level of subdivided units. To ensure the effective implementation of the regulatory regime, it is important to combat illegal rental of subdivided units. The government will have regard to the supply of BHUs in the market and the completion of public housing projects, and enforce against illegal rental of subdivided units after the expiry of the 12-month registration period. To ensure that the households concerned will not be rendered homeless as a result of the enforcement actions or alteration works, we will provide assistance to those in need, including encouraging eligible households to apply for light public housing or transitional housing through the social work teams, or assisting them in looking for alternative accommodation in the private market. We will also flexibly deploy other housing resources to temporarily rehouse households in need. We understand that some divided unit tenants may not be able to meet the eligibility criteria for light public housing or transitional housing. We will put in place a better safety net by adding a new category of Category C tenants for transitional housing on the gazetted date of the BHU ordinance to provide short-term accommodation for those who are affected by enforcement actions or alteration works and have urgent rehousing needs. As for the way forward, the BHU ordinance will be gazetted on 3rd of October 2025 and come into operation on 1st of March 2026 after the passage of the bill. We will start accepting registrations of existing subdivided units on the commencement date of the ordinance, grant a grace period for subdivided units to be converted, and accept applications for recognition of BHUs. Before the implementation of the BHU regulatory regime, the Housing Bureau will carry out a series of preparatory work, including continuing to maintain close liaison with stakeholders, promulgating the code of practice, application guidelines, etc., and preparing for the BHU office and a dedicated website. We will also actively publicize the regulatory regime, including arranging talks and seminars, distributing promotional materials, launching dummies guides. Through various channels, help owners and tenants of subdivided units and other stakeholders understand and comply with the regulatory regime. Today, in the electrical chamber, we have taken a significant step towards getting rid of substandard subdivided units. In the past 3 years, we have taken steps to draft this ordinance, this bill, to tackle this persistent issue of substandard subdivided units. I have mixed feelings today. I thank those who have provided their valuable views to us, members, stakeholders, NGOs. In yesterday's debate, we have heard valuable insights from members on the various suggestions to improve the arrangements. For my colleagues, they have played important roles before, and they will also continue to play important roles in future in implementation. We thank members for their praise of their efforts. I urge members to support the bill. We have taken an important step towards getting rid of substandards of divided units. Later at the committee stage, I will propose various amendments so that we can implement the regulatory regime for BHUs as soon as possible. I so submit. Thank you, President. And now put the question to you that the Basic Housing Units Bill be read the second time. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Basic Housing Units Bill.